Rebel Without a Cause,
Yeah.
1955. One of the most iconic films in history, starring one of the most iconic and short-lived movie stars in history, one Mr.
Mhm.
James Dean, playing the iconic titular rebel Jim Stark. Now, we're here to talk about this, primarily because it's an awesome movie that we haven't reviewed on this show, but also because, once again, Warner Brothers keeps coming out with these, vault restorations in 4K of classic movies. Don, we talked about Maltese Falcon last week, and now they've got Rebel Without a Cause out again with a bunch of like extras, and I mean it's
It's
a
actually
crazy
very
time to be
thin.
alive, right?
It's
Hmm?
actually very thin on extras compared to some of the additions they've done in the past. Like this used to be one of those Warner Brother slipcase 2 DVD things like the old
Mhm.
Robin Hood Prince of Thieves set where there was a lot more special features
I,
than like you get a commentary
yeah,
tops on this.
but the special feature, well, there's more than just that on there, but
Yeah.
the special features you have on here are longer than a lot of special features. I
That's
mean,
true.
the documentary Rebel Without a Cause, The Defiant Innocence, James Dean Remembered, those alone are over an hour and a half in
Whoa.
extras.
Okay.
You
That
know,
Yeah,
helps
so
then.
and that's a good point because a lot of times you'll get like the list on the back of the box. It's like,
Hmm.
there's 40 things, but they're all 3 minutes long.
Yeah.
well, not
Well,
only that, they're all from
current
the
Disney
same
movies.
presser. They're all from the
Right.
Exactly.
same
Yeah.
presser too.
No
So,
one's outfits are different. It's a mess. Yeah. You can tell they all like today's the day, guys. Wear something nice. Get on the stool. You know. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got notes actually for how long each of the extras were. So
There you
Well,
go.
we're not gonna. This isn't gonna be a detailed commercial for
Hmm.
Warner Brothers release, although it is,
But it could
certainly a
be.
cool thing.
Okay.
But I just wanted to kind of kick off with, James Dean is an icon. I was in love with James Dean before I knew who James Dean was because,
Mm.
I'm a kid of that generation. I kind of came of age watching Beverly Hills 90210 and Luke Perry as
Oh
Dylan
yeah.
McKay. Everyone said, "Oh, he's the next James Dean." I think a lot of that was because of the hair, frankly,
Hmm.
and the kind of the cool, distant pose, and he kind of talked in
California
whispers,
setting.
mysterious.
Yeah.
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 But then it was years later in art school that I took interest in a girl who ended up becoming my girlfriend, and she told me that she was a huge James Dean fan. This was over a
Did you
casual
marry
lunch.
this girl?
No, I did
Okay.
not. No, I don't worry about it, Don. It's okay.
Okay. As long as
But
the
I will
missus
say,
knows. Where is she
what
now, Ian?
no clue, and that's
Okay,
probably
just
for the
check. Yeah.
best.
Okay.
But here's what I would do. I would go to great lengths, especially when it involved movies. I think it was over a casual lunch at art school. She's like, "Oh, I love James Dean." I was like, "Yeah, he's cool," but I'd never seen anything with James Dean in it. So that night, I went to my video store and I rented the 3 James Dean films, and I
That's
stayed
all
up
you got.
all
Yeah.
night watching Rebel Without a Cause, East of Eden, and Giant, which is like 3 hours
It
long,
would
and he's
take all
not
night.
even
Yeah.
really in the movie.
No,
two
no.
VHS tapes, two
Yeah.
VHS
That
tapes
was a
for
thick
that
one.
one. That
Hmm.
was a thick one.
Yeah.
Oh, so yeah, that was some commitment there.
On the spot, rank the three.
Mm.
I can't because I haven't seen the other two in a long time.
Okay. Okay.
I don't think I've watched East of Eden since that, marathon viewing.
Hmm.
But if I had to rank them, I would say it's weird because rank them as James Dean movies, it's probably Rebel, East of Eden, and Giant.
I
Rank
agree.
them as films, I would probably say East of Eden,
East of Eden's
Giant,
pretty
and Rebel
good.
Without a Cause. Yeah,
Ooh,
yeah.
that
Well,
clues
because
us into this take on the show here. Okay.
no, I look,
Here
and
it comes.
it's a terrible question because they're all fantastic movies. I love all of them, but if you're just talking about,
Yeah.
as a movies, I mean, Giant is about so many big things. And it's this giant,
Mhm.
no pun intended, epic, grand scale film. And then what I remember of East of Eden, it was more of an, he was still a young actor, but it was more of an adult kind of story, right?
True.
Um, and revisiting Rebel Without a Cause for this show, my eyes were flung wide open because there was some subtext I'd never clued in on, and we're gonna
Hmm.
play "Let's Embarrass Ian" tonight with a. I couldn't believe you didn't pick up on that.
Okay.
But the teen angst in this movie is just like dripping off the screen in ways that
Yeah.
I think when I was 20 and I was watching it, I was like, yeah, I can totally relate to these feelings. Now at 45, I'm like, chill out, kid. It's gonna be all right.
Right. How many of
But
you keyed into like Jim Backus's character more in this movie than you did before? Because like he stole, I don't want to say stole the movie. You don't steal the movie from James Dean, but
no,
Jim Backus comported himself pretty darn good as the dad, and like Thurston Howell's never been better for me for a long time. So
I'm
he's. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mark.
no, I'm just gonna say I'm going to be the odd man out. This was the first time I watched this film all the way through.
there you go.
Wow.
Nothing wrong
Now,
with
is it
that.
because
Welcome
you
to the
didn't
show.
like it, or is
I've-
this
I-
eating your vegetables and you had to watch it, or
Yeah.
what?
It's
probably
one
right.
of those, and I'm sure. Okay, here's my critic credit card or whatever critic card. Here you go,
Oh, no,
Don. You
here.
can tear mine up if you want.
You
I
watched
hadn't-
it. It's right
you
back
know,
to you. It's like a library card. Take it.
It was one of those that was always on my radar, but I never sat down and actually watched it. One of those where, man, I got to watch that sometime, or I run across it, or I'd see clips, or you'd see bits of it, right? Through either documentaries or whatnot. So I'd seen bits and pieces of it. The proper way to say you're tearing me apart versus Tommy Wiseau.
Correct.
Because that's where he stole it from. But I'd seen bits and pieces, but I hadn't actually sat all the way through it. And let me tell you, I fell in love with this movie. And the fact that this is a movie that was wide release that came out in 1955 in the middle of the conservative movement,
Yes.
there's a reason why this film stands out where we're talking about it today. And the documentaries that they have in here, it's funny seeing the promo videos that they have, like they had on the Casablanca release, where they got the behind the camera thing, where they do these little featurettes. I think people forgot they did that. These little 7-minute featurettes with the actors in that. I mean, this was a big movie they were hyping up. And if you watch it, you go, man, I would have loved to be in 1955 sitting in an audience full of adult 1955 males and watching this and watching Thurston Howell be the character he is in this film, which for me, even looking at it from 2023, I love it. It's very progressive, subversive. This film touches on so many levels that I don't think I would have caught it had I watched it sooner.
I'm the same way. Like I know I ate my vegetables a long time ago to see it, but watching it now, it popped. Same thing. It popped off so many fireworks and so many different topics that hit harder now than it did when I was 25. Totally.
Yeah, I mean, we can get into Jim Backus's character, who plays Jim's dad, because we've already kind of put it on the table. It's a fascinating study of these three teenagers that we meet, and we see their parents, except for Sal Mineo's character, who plays Plato. It's his nickname.
Yeah.
And that's sort of the point. Like the relationship with the teens' parents kind of color in how we view them and how they interact with each other, and see how their lives are all kind of screwed up, partially because teenage hormones kind of suck for everybody, but also because what are you going home to at night? Plato is it's the weird thing because Natalie Wood, I think, and probably Sal Mineo, I imagine, were probably closer in age to what they were supposed to be. But I mean, James Dean was
27.
going back to the Luke
26.
Perry thing. It's like,
Yeah.
You
And he
see
looks
that episode
26 too. Yeah.
See that episode of The Simpsons where they made fun of Luke Perry on 90210, and Lisa got him to smile or something, or smiling at a publicity photograph, and like all the 1,000 wrinkles appear on his forehead.
Yeah, because Luke looked old then too, for too old for the part. No, Sal was at the time like the youngest best supporting actor nominee they ever had, like at 17. And Natalie Wood, I think, was right there 19.
16. She was 16. When they actually filmed, she was 16, because that's the whole background controversy we don't have to go into with her and her various beaux at the same time during this film.
I don't care about her fashion, Mark. I'm interested in the other stuff.
He means BEAUs, the men who consorted with her.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Well,
yes.
We'll get
stories
back to
are
the
out
movie at hand, because that's a whole other topic that might get us canceled.
But you were saying Jim. Yeah.
Jim.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's definitely. I had to kind of, when he shows up. I mean, first of all, he's in a very adult situation. One of the greatest, I think, openings that I've ever seen is still we see this kind of like wind up toy monkey on the sidewalk, and then Jim Stark kind of like stumbles into frame drunk, and he's like rolling around on the ground, and you can't tell if he's like laughing or crying. You got the great big red titles playing over it, kind of obscuring things. And the cops come in and they haul him away for public drunkenness. And it takes a little bit to figure out, wait, oh, this kid's in high school. It's not like he's, 21-year-old college kid or something. He's, I guess he's going to be a senior or something. So he's probably 17, 18.
Yeah.
And he's also just landed in this new town. He's starting starting the next day at school, or the next couple of days. And he doesn't have any friends. He meets, our three principal characters meet in a police station.
Yeah.
Because Plato had shot some kittens, I believe.
Puppies.
Or
Puppy killer.
Puppies.
Yeah.
Yeah, he'd shot some puppies. Judy, played by Natalie Wood, I can't remember why she was in there. Had she run away from home or something? Or
yeah, she ran away. Yeah.
Because she wanted attention from her father. And then we get a glimpse of that home life. And it's so strange because she's got a little brother who's probably 8, 9 years old. There's a big, age gap there. And dad is the stern businessman. He gets home and he just wants his, dinner the way he wants it. And, mom's very much in the house apron. And, Judy wants to give him affection and a kiss and everything. He's like, what are you doing? You're way too old for that. And then Junior comes running in with like a coonskin cap and a shotgun or whatever. He's like, come here, tiger. And you're like giving him noogies and stuff. Whereas you look at Jim Stark's family, dad, played by Jim Backus, we see him later on in a business suit, just like, Judy's father, but he's also wearing the house apron, a big frilly yellow house apron. And it's just this, Mark, you mentioned it's sort of a progressive idea. It's, possibly by today's standards, but I think especially back then it was seen as more of an emasculating feature, right?
Truly.
In the one sense, he's serving dinner to I think it's his mom, who's elderly and staying with them. So he doesn't want to get stuff on his suit probably, but when he drops the tray because he's a klutz, he's down, cleaning it up and everything. So it's a very subservient, non kind of masculine role, and he doesn't know how to relate to his kid. He wants to be the best friend. He doesn't know how to discipline him. That's partially why he ends up drunk and in the police station. And then we've got, again, Plato's parents, who we never see, and we just see evidence of like support checks and like maybe a note. His black housekeeper is the mother who kind of looks after him and chases him all around the town.
Which, by the way, that support check, if it was nowadays, you're looking at thousands upon thousands of dollars. My wife sat down and watched this with me. It's funny because I put it in to watch to review, and I'm going to drop my Discovery episode this week on it, but she actually sat down and watched. We watched it Saturday morning. She had never seen it, and she sat down. She was going to walk away. She's like, oh, well, I'll watch it for a while. She sat down and loved it, but she sat there, figured out the cost of the child support check. We're talking $10,000. I mean, we're talking some serious bank in equivalent of today's money. So his parents were well off, and you look at it, you're like, these kids are all in the wrong families.
Yeah,
in a way,
should trade a few places there. Yeah,
you could trade a few places. At least James Dean's his character and her should swap families.
Yeah, I think so.
Because the dad, who's now stern, would probably give the discipline needed to rein in our rebel. And the father would be able to show the emotions and the affection to the daughter easier than her actual biological father. So I caught that dynamic between those two. It's almost as if they're in opposite families.
I never pieced that together. I mean, that's a really, now here's a question.
I think that's why they
the
identify
absentee
each other
parents
too. Yeah.
Right.
Well, who gets the absentee parents?
The kid who needs the most help. Let's just say it. Because the kid, drunk and disorderly is one thing. Wandering away from your dad's another thing. Shooting up some puppies, keeping a gun in your jacket, that kid needs some help. And he's probably the youngest one of these three, the most fragile of these three, and he gets no help. He gets black servant.
And the thing is,
and random checks. And you could tell how quickly, of course, he sponges to any social attention, any brotherly or fatherly attention from other people, where the kid with the most help has the least, and that's quite a volleyball setup for this movie.
So I
Right.
imagine he would almost be more at home with Jim's dad, being
Yeah.
the authority figure who is there, but also has that kind of sensitive touch,
Mhm.
and this is, I'll just jump right into it. I never really thought about this movie or Plato's relationship to Jim as a
Mm.
metaphor for Plato's, latent homosexuality.
Oh, that's
I,
the
I
bell rang for me hard, but more
it
this time than last
Nice
time I
choice of
watched
words,
it.
Don, but no,
Where's the blinger around here? Ding.
but no,
Well,
like when I first watched it, 25 years ago, whatever, I thought it was just he looked up to him and he was
Klinger
really
friend.
into that
Screech.
kind of,
Yeah.
yeah, it was a Screech and Zach
Yeah.
Morris kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And he loved the idea of being part of this, kind of found family of runaways with Judy being the mom and Jim
Mhm.
being the dad, and he just wanted some guidance, but uh my God, I don't know if this was intentional because I don't even know if this phrase was used back in 1955.
Yeah.
But towards the end of the movie, I'm jumping all over the place and giving spoilers here. So if you haven't seen it, folks, watch Rebel Without a Cause, please. But there's a bit where Plato has a gun and they're hiding out at the planetarium, and the cops are outside, and Jim goes in to try and save his friend, keep him from doing something stupid,
Mhm.
and he says, "Are you gonna come out now?" to
Oh,
Plato, and
I don't know
he
if that
really
term was there too.
stresses
That's a good
that.
question. Good
Yeah.
question.
But Jim he's so alien. The only way I could think of it is he's almost got this Jared Leto quality to him, where he's
Another
off
guy
on
who's
his
been
own,
compared to Dean. Yeah.
Mhm.
Because
but
the
not,
list of people compared to Dean, Franco, Leto, Paul Walker, Luke Perry, we've had of every generation for 50 years here.
but it's not so much the pose, it's the kind of detached, like he doesn't
Oh, yeah.
almost like an autism thing or something, where he doesn't quite pick up on the cues of the people around him. He's just totally off on his own trip.
Plato or
Um,
Jim?
Jim.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Jim's
Plato
probably the
is
one.
overly sensitive, but
Yeah.
especially like when we first meet him, he's so in tune with his family's dysfunction that he's like this balled up, screaming, crying, energetic
Mhm.
mess. But as the movie goes on, and when he's talking to, hang out with Judy and Plato, uh, like Plato starts shooting at the other gang members who come to the mansion, right?
Yup.
And then
Mhm.
Jim kind of comes out of the room like, "Hey, what's going on, Plato? What are you doing? What are you doing with the gun?"
Yeah.
Like, not even like he was trying to calm him down. It's as if he's just like, "Oh, weird, man. What are you doing with that thing? Can I see it?" That kind of a pose.
Oh, it's the 50s. No, it's 50s beatnik. It's a
True.
little bit
Yeah.
more of that attitude,
And he'd been playing that aloofness all movie, like the way he talked
right.
to the juvenile officer, the way he ball busts his dad into being more of a man around his, harder, sterner wife / mother. Yeah, like the aloofness is there. Some of that.
He-
I wonder how, but you're right. I wonder how much of that is Dean. I wonder how much of that's on the page.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
I
know this
think
was based on a book or a
It
story of
is
some kind. It was
very
adapted and
loosely
then
based.
another
Yeah.
adaptation. Yeah.
it,
Sorry,
I
Mark, go
think
ahead.
no, I was just gonna say I think it's a combination of both, but definitely part of Dean's style and approach to it, especially if you look at some of the behind the scenes stuff on the disc. They go into Dean's personality and how it was really odd how sometimes he was be the friendliest guy and sometimes
Mhm.
he would be the most disconnected individual, and they're like, he loved his racing at least, but his personality. So I think a lot of him came across on screen, especially in the Jim character, and again, looking at this film, it's amazing this film got released by a big studio,
Yeah.
because the
And a
way
legit director. Yeah.
being a consumer of the underground grindhouse, type of film, this type of subversive story would usually be regulated to the B movie, or worse, to the grindhouse pictures, to those
Mhm.
corner theaters or whatnot, those ones that are showing Reefer Madness and those that are showing the, she should have said no type of movies, those type of PSA type stuff, because it's dark. It does not portray your family values, father knows best, leave it to Beaver type of family style that the culture was trying to build up at the time.
Oh,
And
totally.
here's a film that basically pulls back the curtain and goes, no, we're all still screwed up.
Yeah, this film's 20 years too early. Like, this is something you would expect New Hollywood to kick out, like that, like a voice like De Palma would make, or like, maybe not De Palma, but like one of those 70s John Cassavetes movies that would come out with just a same idea here, but a harder edge, thicker curtain you pull back. But the fact that even got this thick that it did is really impressive.
Well, let me ask about that, because I think part of the thing that works so well about this is the fact that it has the aesthetic of 1955. If you talk about something from the mid 70s, I don't know that those directors, those filmmakers would have put on a 1955 set movie. They would have done something in the mid 70s or contemporary to when they're making films. And that's what's so powerful about it, because if you look at it, I mean, everybody is dressed like, Leave It to Beaver. When we see the glimpses of the family life, it's just that it's almost like the Superman 3 when Soups goes bad. Like he's wearing the suit, but it's just all the colors are gray and dark, and he's got the 5 o'clock shadow, and things are just a little bit off.
Yeah.
And then we see just how off they are. Yeah.
But look at that red all movie, like her lips, his jacket, the cars, of course, the hint of anger and bloodshed. Like, the suggestion is thick there, and it's really impressive. It's thematic stuff you don't see in the 50s. So, or unless Hitchcock's doing it,
Well, you also, I mean, talk about that red jacket, but look at the rest of his ensemble, which he puts that on in like the second half of the movie when we get into the trip to the mansion and all that. But he's got a red jacket, a pristine white, t-shirt, and bright blue jeans. So he's wearing the American flag, much like Peter Fonda would, in the next decade in Easy Rider. So, I mean, it's weird. I don't know how much, Mark, you had said it's a miracle this thing got made when it did. I wonder how much was the wool was being pulled over the eyes of the studio and perhaps the audience, because it was one of those things that may have been ahead of its time, right out there in front of you, critiquing the culture in which it came out. How many people are even clued into that? Like the whole, gay subtext with, with Plato, was that, like, right now we can watch it as 2023 people and be like, of course, but in 1955, because it just wasn't something that was talked about. I mean, hell, you still had situations where like girls would go off to join the monastery if they, if they got in trouble, and all these, euphemisms. It's a really bold movie, but beyond kind of messaging and symbolism, it works as a really big dramatic piece. Like when Plato was, his final scene, especially with that weird, like, drunken tilt of the camera as he falls down, I was, I got teared up, and I knew what was coming, but it hit me in a way that it hadn't even, the first time I saw it.
Well, I mean, we've seen it in the 50s shows before, where they show the kids, the gangs, the rebels, and they're that all the way through. They're the hardcore. They're they're just like what we see in Grease, those stereotypical greaser type gang members. Or
West Side Story,
or West Side Story, or
that's still 5 years off. It's amazing.
There's still a lot of portrayal of the gangs as being just these hardcore folks. You don't see their background. But what I love about this, there's this wonderful scene, and I apologize for jumping around, but it kind of leads to why you're connected to Plato, is because all the kids in here, while they have their issues, and looking at it from 2023, they're falling into those stereotypes. We could see these are just lost kids, but they're just kids. You get that wonderful scene after Jim and the leader of the one gang, not Buzz, it wasn't Buzz, it was
it was Buzz.
Where they had the knife fight of just the tips, just stabbing a little. Which
there goes more of that subtext.
I know there is some subtext there, but after that fight, they decide to do the chicken race, and you get this wonderful scene between Buzz and Jim where they're just by themselves. And, he's like, why do you do this? He's like, and Buzz comes right out very seriously and goes, what else are we going to do?
Yeah, I love that line.
In that moment. At that moment, suddenly you've grounded all these kids to where they're not your stereotypical gangs. They're just kids, but they've got parents who don't necessarily want to do anything with them anymore now that they're adults. Oh, when I was your age, I was on my own. So they're kind of cutting that string, and these kids need that. These aren't the kids that can be cut cords. So they're doing all these things because they don't know what else to do, because they don't have guidance, because the parents up to a certain age, well, we're done parenting. I mean, you get that with Judy's dad. On one hand, through 2023 sensibility, you get this kind of creepy vibe between them, of that she's got this little extra affection towards dad. But it's more, you can take it that way. But when talking to my wife about that, it's more of an attention thing, to where he just cut it off, because they mentioned earlier how she used to be his funny face or whatever. He used to call her, kid names, like he calls the young boy, but he doesn't do that anymore. He doesn't acknowledge her anymore. And what's funny is I looked at it going, maybe because we're talking 50 sensibility, his young daughter has grown up to be a young woman who's attractive, and that he may have problems dealing with that. So he cuts himself off completely, no affection, because he might be afraid that some affection might mean something else. I mean, there's some subtext there with her family as well. And the mom, the way she is towards her Judy, could be just a hint of jealousy in there. I mean, there's an interesting dynamic in there, if you're looking at it, that in each of these families, you can see through these three characters where the rest of the kids from the gang are coming from. So it suddenly grounds them.
Totally.
Well, I think, I mean, and that's during that, the lead up to the chicken race. You alluded to, what else we're going to do. There is, when the guys go off on their own, they're getting ready to look at the cars. Buzz is almost reluctantly chummy towards Jim. He's not cold. He's not like, I don't care if you win this race, I'm going to beat the crap out of you.
Yeah.
You almost get the sense
he's not Biff Tannen. You know what I mean?
Right.
But not ultra bully.
Right. But if you get the feeling that if that race had ended up differently, no matter who won, they would have proven to the outside gang and the outside world that they were both man enough to participate in the race, and then they could be friends, and Jim could either be in the gang, or at least the gang would leave him alone.
I think so.
Kind of like, it was like a rite of passage almost.
Totally.
Unfortunately, it didn't, end that
way.
Didn't. Did you guys ever see the movie The Heavenly Kid?
No.
Yes.
Okay.
Tell me more.
1987, I believe. I watched this movie on repeat because it was always on HBO, but essentially, and I hadn't really put that together until watching Rebel this time. It opens in the 1950s, I think, or maybe the 60s, with this exact setup. You've got the bully guy, and you've got the dude in the leather jacket, the sort of the James Dean guy, and they're racing off a cliff. But in this case, it's the James Dean kind of rebel dude who gets his jacket caught on the door handle, and he goes off the cliff and he dies. That's the opening of the movie. He ends up in the afterlife, and he meets an angel who takes him 25 years into the future to mentor the teenage loser son of his girlfriend from back in that time, and teach him how to become like, the tough macho guy. And there's a lot of lessons and stuff. It's a very kind of weird, touching movie, but it's like an alternate reality version of what happened at the end of Rebel Without a Cause if Jim had gone over that cliff.
I will look that up. No, if you can imagine, in the 50 sensibilities, this was mixed, if not savaged, by critics.
Oh, yeah.
It was Warner Brothers' second biggest grossing movie for the studio that year. But like, you could tell the old coot writers are like, they were not ready for the curtain turned back. The shocking depiction, the weird depiction, even if they got the vibes that we're getting now, they didn't know what to do with them, and they respected kind of mixed on Dean. I think Wood, Mineo got Oscar nominations. Nicholas Ray, the director, got an Oscar nomination, but nothing for Dean. Who's so kind of the driving force there. So yeah, I mean, I get if you're Natalie Wood and you're 16, 17, and you have that adult and that I don't know, just rippled interpretation. Yeah, that deserved the consideration she got as an acting, and then Mineo out of nowhere, doing that part. So, but man, I mean, Dean, Force of Nature, how do you not put him in that category? So
Well, we're talking studio system here. He was still
This is true.
early on.
But
So,
he had
you
the
know,
but he had the ledger juice going where like dude, the guy died
he
and he's an icon.
he did, but
Yeah.
also, like I said, with where I alluded to earlier, and what you get when you look at some of these documentaries that are on this disc, people talk about his off-screen behavior, and back then that meant a lot more. It still does today, as we're getting modern examples of, but back then, especially with the studio system, it really, like, your handlers, if you started being that, they're just like, he wasn't really in the limelight, you know. That, I mean, you know, he was the young and coming, but he only had, like we said, 3 films. You know, this was only his second movie.
I'm looking up the Oscars now. Dean was nominated, but it was for East of Eden.
Right.
Yeah.
You know,
he wasn't going to get a double nominee that year. So.
But he's not going to get a double nominee, and you're playing a subversive character. Natalie Wood is good in here for a young actress. I would say, I don't know, I'm kind of on the fence about the Academy Award nomination for it, in all honesty. It's a good performance.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. But
she lost to a big hitter anyways.
Yeah.
Who did she lose to?
Joe Van Fleet for East of Eden.
Yeah.
And that acting category was loaded. You had Ernest Borgnine for Marty.
That's gonna be so weird. Like 2 James Dean movies nominated in the same year and different people competing. My gosh.
But in actor, it was Borgnine for Marty, which was his classic performance.
Yeah.
Cagney in Doing a Cagney Thing, Love Me or Leave Me. Dean for East of Eden. Frank Sinatra for The Man with the Golden Arm, which was his biggest, huge step up curveball. And then Spencer Tracy, Bad Day at Black Rock, which is a great movie. So, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, loaded year.
It was just loaded. Yeah. And so, you know, you can kind of see why Dean lost, but he got it for East of Eden, not this. Since you had 2 movies the same year, they're going to give it to East of Eden because, again, don't necessarily want to shed light on the film that pulls back the subversive, you know, pulls back the not so great 50s family lifestyle that everybody knew was there. And that's one of the things with this film, is that you get the feeling that it kind of was like by critics of that, because they're like, no, that's not how things are at all. When that's exactly how things are.
Well, I don't know how much
so few movies do that to a level that we know then or recognize then, or we'll realize it years later and go, damn, that thing cut hard. Like, and that's the most recent one for me is like Moonlight was a curtain puller. We're like, wow, things are that tough for some kids, and then you throw in homosexuality, make it tougher, and holy shit, you know, that movie goes dark and hurry about what kids go through. And then I know it's a completely far cry from Rebel Without a Cause, but it's in that ballpark of Firebrand, you know.
Well, it's not that far, because they, like, Warner Brothers recently announced, or I'd heard something about, they're going to be doing, like, I think short films, contemporary versions of their classic movies. And they're going to be doing a sort of a remake of Rebel Without a Cause for, like, modern diverse audiences. So we might get to see the Moonlight version of Rebel Without a Cause. I am not at all interested in that, but
no, thank you. Yeah.
Because I can't imagine. I mean, I'll watch it because I'm curious, but there are some things that just need to be left alone. But I mean, it's an interesting thing. I understand what you're saying, Mark, about, you know, it was the kind of the big screen lie that this movie kind of pulled back the curtain on, to use your phrase. But, you know, filmmaking of that era, yes, it was kind of tough to swallow, certainly by today's standards, but I wonder how much of it was malicious versus being, you know, painting an aspirational picture of, you know, a good family life. The fact that family lives were not like that for a lot of people, you know, today you're hard pressed to find a positive vision of the American family in TV or movies. We've gone almost in the entirely opposite direction.
Yeah, how fucked up can we make people now, right? Yeah, and then laugh at them or cry with them at the same time. Right.
So I like that balance. One of the things I like about Rebel Without a Cause is it, you know, takes something that is a kind of a positive illusion and pulls it back, but still finds some positivity in it, because the kids are all messed up, but in the end, aside from poor Plato, they're going to be all right.
That's the thing. Look who dies, the gay kid. That's still the 50s smacking that volleyball down, going, he's not going to make it out of here. That's the kid that shouldn't be here. He's the weirdo.
Well, that's the thing is, he is one of the weirdos. I think if you wanted to go the extreme, you would have had all three
mean,
of those kids get killed. And going back to what I had said before about text versus subtext, you know, Nicholas Ray and the writers might have had that in mind, but I don't know how much of the mass American audience, the teeny boppers, are going to see James Dean are like, I can't believe they killed off the gay kid. I think they're thinking, I can't believe they killed off the nerd, or, you know, the kid who looked up to Jim Stark. Like, there's anything more going on.
Do you get the bisexuality vibe out of Jim Stark? Like, is he okay with Plato getting a little close, laying on his leg, like, and of course he's got the hots for Natalie Wood. Who wouldn't? But I mean,
well, does
that vibe is there too?
Does he have the hots for her? Because I see that's the other kind of revelation about this. And to your point, Don, you know, she makes, and I have to go back and watch it kind of frame by frame, but she makes a lot of moves on him.
True.
She's constantly caressing him. He's laying in like her lap or her arms. And she's like, oh, your lips are so pillowy and soft. And he's kind of aloof. So, and at the end of the picture, he introduces her, to his parents, like they're all on the steps of the Griffith Observatory, you know, dad's there, mom's there. And Jim says, Mom, Dad, this is Judy. And then they kind of walk off. And I'd never caught this before, but Jim's dad looks at the mom and says something like, but he's almost to say, we thought he was gay. Like, because then I'm thinking like the whole, like, we keep having to move towns because he gets into trouble with other boys or something like that. Like, I'm wondering, is it fighting trouble? Is it getting caught? Like, what is going on here?
And how well can Nicholas Ray hide that in a movie and get away with it in 1954?
Not too well, because there is another. I know,
because here we are talking.
Well, but what I'm saying, there's a visual cue in here that I think might just be a complete coincidence, but I've got that sick kind of mind. I think they're in the mansion, I believe, and like one of the 1,000 scenes where Jim Stark is like leaning back, like looking at the ceiling, and someone's like, he's laying in someone's lap. But there's a fireplace going, and the angle of the camera is you see Jim almost his full body down to like his knees. He's laying there in the firelight, and the flames are licking, like just like shooting up, and it almost looks like it's shooting up directly from his crotch. It's
you know, I would
never can watch it.
You won't
unsee it.
Okay.
The other angle you could possibly take with Plato is I mean, and they may have played it this way in the 50s, and they try to in the film. It is not a lover love, but a son-father love, because Plato doesn't have that father figure in his life at all. He doesn't even have his mom in his life. And here you have this couple who are, you know, they're together. He's got affection for him, whether or not it's love on a sexual, or it might even be, hear me out. It's possible it might be just a little bit more innocent, to where it's he sees this, and you almost look at the three of them like a uncle, aunt, nephew dynamic. I won't say father, you know, mom, but almost that type of dynamic.
I think you're stealing the film executives pitching that to Warner. Like, they'll see the dailies and be like, what the fuck is going on here? And like, no. It's like an uncle and an aunt and a nephew, you know, like that's how they're selling it, with a pack of cigarettes and a box of cigars to Warner execs. Yeah.
You can play it on either angle, obviously. You know, but and I wouldn't be, and now that what we know now about the 50s, it very much is probably, you know, more along the lines of alluding to the sexuality, you know. And it's a wild film that you're like, this is from the mid 50s. I mean, everything underneath and being portrayed. And, you know, that's the thing though, Jim Backus's character, we talk about the dad being in the frilly apron and that, but he justifies it. And you look at it going, the way his wife is, and we see how his wife is, he's trying to play both roles because his wife's such a hard ass, especially to his son. So he's trying to kind of play both sides, which in the 50s looked at, oh, he's being soft. Today I look at, he's manning up and being he's trying to be here he can take care of the family. He's trying to take care of his son, but also his mom, try to be the man of the 50s, but also try to give that kind of caring angle, though he doesn't quite know how to do it. I'm not saying he's doing it right, but he's trying, because the mom, you feel, doesn't want any, she just has such vitriol towards the son for most of the film, that you see where he's trying to make up for both of it.
It reminds me of Paul Thomas Anderson in Boogie Nights, the one bit where we get of Mark Wahlberg's character before he leaves home to to become an adult film actor. He comes in from being out all night, I think, with Jack Horner, and the mom just starts like screaming at him. We almost think it's a single parent situation, but we cut to the bedroom, and the dad is just sitting there on the bed, kind of hunched over, like, what am I gonna do? What good is it gonna? She's at it again. I'm powerless to do. Like, there's a key line at the end of this movie where I think it's after Plato's dead, and the dad is there hugging Jim Stark, and he says, "I'll try and be as strong as you want me to be." That's still not good enough. That's like, if you need me to be strong, I'll be strong. I'm still your buddy. Like, he almost needs the compassionate, the slight, I guess, more compassionate version of Judy's dad. He needs someone. This is the 1950s, kind of, I guess, play, but I think it still works today. You need someone to show you how to be, for lack of a term, how to be a man, how to be kind of a leader, and show discipline and affection.
Right.
The mom and the dad, their roles are melding into each other. Like, she's the stern kind of disciplinarian who shows him no love, and the dad, almost to try and protect him, shows too much squishiness, so he doesn't know where to go except out and brawl around and possibly screw around.
Yeah, it's interesting. And like I said, with the Judy dynamic, you see how Judy is reaching out, and why the way she is because, I mean, her dad cut her off basically from any type of actual affection that she was used to. She's an adult, he's treating her not necessarily coldly, but definitely like an acquaintance versus his daughter, and you have the mom, where there's a weird, interesting dynamic between the mom and Judy as well, so you can see why Judy is rebelling. That's the whole thing. You can see the motivation for the kids, something you're not quite used to seeing for films of this age, the actual motivation behind why the kids are the way they are. Usually we just got the kids are the way they are. We don't really get until, I would say, maybe the 70s, but definitely not until the 80s, where you start to explore the parent dynamic affecting how the kid is.
We can thank Hughes for that.
But yeah, but not so much in the 50s.
Not the 70s. Yeah. They are the way they are. Totally.
They just are the way they are. Oh, those kids are just being kids the way they are. But here we see, well, look at their family life. They're not. And I would say Plato dying, maybe on one angle is, the homosexual angle, the undertones there with it, or making a statement, look what happened to the kid whose parents got divorced.
True. I mean,
well, and that also, if you want to look at it from a different angle, it is sort of an ultra conservative message. Like, stay together, maintain a strong family unit, or else your kid's gonna end up gay and dead.
Yeah. Because even Backus has that line of, like, when I saw that red coat, I thought it was you. Like, that's the ultimate fear, is my kids are gonna die because of their derelict behavior. Like, that fear was sent out loud and clear in this movie, for sure.
And what's interesting is, I guess we can kind of wrap up here, but
sure.
It's something that another thing I hadn't picked up on, the lack of kind of, I was going to say lack of spirituality, but almost this atheistic quality that pervades the movie. When the kids go to the planetarium, you've got the iconic knife fight, on this kind of the balcony of the planetarium.
Yeah.
These kids are going at each other, and they set up the rules like, no sticking, only like light jabs, but still they're going at each other with knives, and there's no like real fear or trepidation. They're just going to do it because that's what they do. And they're almost not afraid of dying, because I think going back inside that planetarium, they're looking at the stars, and they're listening to this narration. And it said, the earth will not be missed, when it eventually gets swallowed up by the sun or whatever. And then I can't remember who said, if it was the narrator or one of the kids, but they said, man is an episode of little consequence. So there is
this
this
is
sort
an
of
atheist fever dream for sure.
but
Yeah.
it's also, there's no sense of religion or nationalism. There is a great bit where one of the greasers, I think, steals a comb from a cop and puts it
Mhm.
up to his, lips and starts doing the Sig Heil salute and marching around. This is post World War II, like 20 years, or no, sorry, 10 years on from the end of that war. So there's nothing to fight for, nothing to die for, nothing to believe in, the sort of the decadence of 1950s Americana that is going to have an effect on the youth who are coming up in that sort of lost, generation.
Well, and it's just the reality of it. These kids, like you said, don't have that reality necessarily of war. Some of them were too young to remember, and they were at the tail end of the war. But also the fact of, I think the kids have, at their age, they have a more grip of reality than, say, their parents did at that age.
True.
Because that
Their youth
planet
was stolen by war.
And can we just say that is the most
Depression.
nihilistic planetarium presentation I've ever heard? I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't remember going to the planetarium and ever feeling this nihilistic. But
they hit it hard, yeah.
But it was
But we hadn't landed on the moon yet. So a lot of it is just like talk about stars and this kind of vague thing of like, there's no sense of wonder in it. It was just kind of like, the cold, heartless vacuum of space. You are nothing.
Also ahead of its time, because 2001 is 68. That's 14 years after this, where you really get closer to that nihilistic shit.
And I think the religion possibly is still there. It's not the focus at all of the film, because we're seeing everything from the kids' perspective, not the parents. I imagine the parents are still going to church, and that the kids go to church because their parents make them, not necessarily because they want to, because they have a bit more grip of the grime of reality, so to speak, because they're sitting there and that's all they have to think about, because they don't have a whole lot more to draw their focus to. So I think the religion is there. I don't think the kids are rejecting full spirituality and beliefs, but they're rejecting their parents' interpretation of spirituality and what they believe. They have
like, I don't even think it came up.
No,
I mean, usually in a movie like this, you'll have like a concerned parent who's like, I'm gonna pray for you, or whatever. You're going down the devil's path.
Yeah, or how many movies have we seen since 1954 take exactly what you're talking about, of like, my kid's a screw up, church will find them, or like those measures are first things out of the first aid kit. A family first aid kit is religion. We've seen that trope played 1,000 times, and if you haven't, go look at a faith-based channel of TV. Like like their mentality, and it, like their mentality is still in the 50s, and like that God and Jesus will cure all of that, all that angst, all that disquiet, stuff like that. When a movie like this will come around and go, maybe not, and
well, look, for the record, I'm not saying there's nothing to that, but there is a way of presenting it and kind of getting heavy-handed, where it's like,
I'm glad the heavy hand particularly for sure. Yeah.
What's that?
If that heavy-handed religion is in this movie, it's not the classic it is. Simple as that.
Right.
The fact that
it's also because I think these kids would not be receptive to that, to that message at all.
Yeah.
Well, and let's just look at the title of the film, Rebel Without a Cause. It's not just Jim Stark. The Rebel Without a Cause is the entire youth in this film. In some way, shape, or form is the actual rebel. They don't have rebels without a cause, obviously, because you're following Jim Stark. But if you look at the rest of the teenagers, their parents have given up. So
there's not a good apple in the bunch.
The spirituality is there, but their parents have either tried at this point in their life, or have tried just enough to say they tried, and all their kids, and don't really care. They're just waiting for their kids to be 18. You get the feeling that nearly all these parents, minute the kid's 18, they're getting the boot to the butt and getting out the door, and go make something of yourself, son, or whatever. You know.
I mean, honestly, it's weird to say, but like the most compassionate characters, I think, in this movie are the police and the police psychiatrist. Who are, because you see the shrink he kind of pops up. He's very heavy in the beginning, but then he kind of comes in at the end. But you
Yeah.
see there's just the look of horror on his face, that not like horror, but you can tell what he's thinking when he's seeing these people like, you guys are all screwed up, and this is the reason your kids are out at midnight hanging out in an abandoned mansion and getting into knife fights and gun shootouts with the cops. But all right, on that cheery note, I'm gonna sincerely thank you guys for hanging out and talking Rebel Without a Cause. It's a movie that I hadn't watched in 25 years, and I had a completely different take on it. I'm anxious to watch it again and probably listen to some like commentaries and get some additional contacts. But you guys have been great. I really appreciate the discussion, guys.
You betcha. No, it deserves its icon status. It's legit.
Yes.
You hear a lot.
One more.
Yeah, you hear a lot of people use the term film ahead of its time, and a lot of times it's overused. It's not the case for Rebel Without a Cause, because if you watch this film today, there are still a lot of themes, a lot of situations that could apply to today's youth easily. Maybe not the exact situation, but the underlying theme, the underlying point of what they're trying to make with these different types of families still apply today. And that's what makes this a classic. Never mind the behind the scenes drama, just the film that's presented itself. You clean this up, which it is, it's beautifully cleaned, and you look at it today, it fits today, even if the situations aren't exactly.
It'd be an opium thing. It'd be Euphoria today, right?
It'd be Euphoria. It'd be kind of like Euphoria. Yeah.
Well, I would say, aside from Natalie Wood, who, I like her as an actress, but in this, she does feel the most, traditional movie studio actorly type of the rest of the cast, who's sort of like naturalistic in the roles. She just feels a bit more formal, even when she's trying to be the loose, angsty teenager. There's something about her that I found it kind of grating, especially in the opening when she's crying about her dad and all that stuff. When she gets into the histrionics, it's a bit much. When she's hanging out with Dean and Plato later, I think that's the terrific stuff. But I could go on for another hour, but I can't, because Mark, I got a date with you talking about another 16-year-old actress named Nicole Kidman. We're talking about BMX Bandits, so stay tuned for that on Mark's channel.
Oh my!
I just want to throw out that the extras on here, again, I can't bring up enough. I was impressed. They give it the same treatment as Casablanca. It may not seem it on the listing, but if you watch all of them, there's a lot. But what's most fascinating is those behind-the-scene featurettes, the little 7-minute featurettes. Realize this is 1955. Because when they show Natalie Wood, they go, and here's Natalie Wood with that macaroni and cheese proof figure, one that every studio's looking for.
Yeah,
but
that's
aren't we?
In this
and then he drops, but aren't we all? And I'm just watching this going, whoa! Like, she's not 18 yet, dude.
Yeah. Well, that. Hollywood, so that's she's almost past her prime at that point. No, anyway, all right. Well, guys, thanks again. Mark the Movie Man Krawczyk from the Spoiler Room podcast, Don Shanahan of Every Movie Has a Lesson and Film Obsessive and Cinephile History Fit podcast. It's always a pleasure. Thank you, guys. We'll be back talking, as Don, you alluded to, I think another classic movie real soon. Cool Hand Luke, another blind spot for me. I've never seen that one.
Ooh, you're in for a treat.
Now you're going to be in for a treat. That one I have seen. So
there you go.
All right. Well, take it easy, gang. We'll catch you later, and stay cool.